This is a Fox News alert. Major breaking news and huge developments tonight. According to two stunning reports, American spies paid $100,000 to a shadowy Russian last year in exchange for stolen NSA documents and for so-called compromising material on President Trump. So in other words, were American deep state spies potentially paying Russians for Trump dirt? Now, we're going to break down all the new details tonight. And the media distorts why the Democrats' memo was not released late last week. Now, liberals set the trap for the Trump administration by including sources and methods. Only problem for them? Well, the president didn't fall for this. Plus, senators raising questions tonight about former Obama National Security Advisor Susan Rice over an email she sent to herself on Trump's inauguration day. Also new tonight, the liberal mainstream media fawning over the sister of the murdering dictator Kim Jong-un at the Olympics while criticizing Vice President Mike Pence. We're going to show you that video and explain to the brain-dead media why they shouldn't be praising a rogue regime that tortures and kills people in prison camps, and starves their own children. Also, remember the plane load, $1.7 billion in cash and other currencies that the Obama administration gave to Iran? Well, the Washington Times tonight reporting that some of that money can be traced back to terrorist groups like Hezbollah. We'll cover that and much more in tonight's Breaking News Opening Monologue. All right, before we get into all the news we have tonight, on this show, we're never going to forget that Hillary Clinton, we now know, rigged the primary against Bernie Sanders. We're not going to forget that her exoneration was written before the investigation was even near complete on the private email server. We're not going to forget that a phony dossier bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton with Russian lies was used to get a FISA court warrant against Carter Page, even though the FBI never verified the information. On this show, we're going to stay on this story until we get justice. Now on to tonight's developments. Now, we have two shocking reports, both from the New York Times and The Intercept. They are raising serious questions this hour about just how far the deep state will go to damage President Trump. Now, according to these reports, American spies met last year with an unnamed Russian who was thought to have ties to Russian intelligence. Now, the American officials were interested in recovering powerful cyber tools that had been hacked, but this Russian person quickly claimed to have, quote, compromising material on President Trump. Now, the New York Times does report that the American intelligence officials say they were only interested in retrieving the NSA cyber weapons, but the Russian was eagerly pushing anti-Trump information, which included 15-second video of an American businessman in a room talking to two women. And according to the Times, there was no way to verify who was in that video, and the American spies thought it was incredible. Now, the Times reports that the American officials eventually agreed to pay this shadowy Russian $100,000. But instead of turning over NSA hacking tools, he gave them, quote, unverified and possibly fabricated information involving Mr. Trump and others, including bank records, emails, and purported Russian intelligence data. Now, the $100,000 was supposed to be the first installment of $1 million that they were going to pay out, which was down from $10 million that the Russian originally was asking for. Now, the Times also notes that since the phony anti-Trump dossier, authored by Christopher Steele, came out last year, there have been at least 4 Russians with espionage connections, and they have tried to sell damaging information to political operatives, spies, and investigators. And also, according to the Times, remember Cody Shearer, longtime Clinton ally, who would write a second fake news dossier, quote, he has been crisscrossing Eastern Europe for more than 6 months to secure the purported compromat, which means compromising material from a different Russian. So there's a lot of information to take in here. Let me try and connect these dots for you. U.S. intelligence officials paying $100,000 to a Russian with purported ties to Moscow ends up giving them unverified, possibly fabricated anti-Trump information. Now, where that information is, who has that information, we don't know. Now, the CIA tonight is strongly denying the information being reported by the New York Times and The Intercept. And the NSA reportedly declined to provide a comment to The Intercept. And on top of all of this, we're also learning that at least 4 other Russians have been shopping around compromising information. By the way, I thought they liked Trump. And longtime Clinton friend Cody Shearer is literally going all over Europe trying to dig up damaging dirt about President Trump from a Russian. Here's what it all means tonight. Russia is doing everything they can do to spread lies about President Trump, and Democrats are more than happy to accept it because they'll do anything to damage the president. And I thought this was the horrible thing to do. I thought we spent a year investigating collusion with the Russians. But we have discovered real collusion. And these new reports are offering up even more evidence that we hadn't seen before. Now, we already know that Hillary Clinton and the DNC, they paid over, $12 million to Fusion GPS. They hired the former British spy, Christopher Steele. He created that dossier filled with Russian government lies and propaganda, salacious material. Well, Clinton did that with what intention? She wanted to impact the general election. It didn't matter if it was truthful or not. And those two memos, as they were uncovering here, the FBI and DOJ, then they used the salacious, unverified dossier of Christopher Steele to get a warrant to spy on the Trump campaign and their associate Carter Page. And according to the memos, the dossier made up the bulk. Remember, the Grassley and Graham memo made up the bulk of the FISA application. And then the FBI, James Comey, they never bothered to verify it. And then they used it, and they go before a FISA court in an effort to spy on Carter Page and the Trump campaign. They never said Hillary Clinton bought and paid for it. And it's not verified, as they should have. And as we told you about on Friday, Politico is reporting that former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon, he may have been picked up by FBI surveillance while Carter Page was being spied on. And a State Department official actually admitted in an op-ed that he was sharing anti-Trump opposition research from friends of the Clintons with the dossier creator, Christopher Steele. This is all an unprecedented abuse of power. The Constitution is being shredded before your eyes. Civil liberties are being severely violated. Remember the Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable search and seizure? And yes, in spite of what the media is telling you and downplaying, it is bigger than Watergate. And as we have been reporting, a lot more information is coming out every day. Now, take a look at the side of your screen. Think this is a small scandal? So far, 14 officials at the DOJ and the FBI have either been fired, reassigned, demoted, or quit. They want to get out of there. And there are a lot of others who are involved in what is being exposed. But simply being moved around the bureaucracy, that's not going to be good enough. That's not going to solve the problems. All of these officials, they all need to be investigated, and those that are guilty, prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law so this never happens again. Also new tonight, Senator Grassley and Senator Graham of the Senate Judiciary Committee, they're now demanding answers from President Obama's former national security advisor, Susan Rice. Now, they discovered a partially unclassified email that she actually sent to herself on President Trump's inauguration day. And Rice, through this email, appears to document a January 5th, 2017, Oval Office meeting between President Obama, former FBI Director James Comey, and former Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates regarding Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. In her email, Rice notes that President Obama apparently told Comey and others to handle things, quote, by the book. Really? And Grassley and Graham are struck by the context and the timing of this email, and they have now sent out a series of questions for Rice to answer by February 22nd. Now, while Republican memos are providing damning facts and evidence about deep state government corruption, well, the Democrats, they're desperately trying to cover up the truth. They never wanted you to see this information, and they're trying to change the narrative. They put out their own counter memo, and on Friday, President Trump sent the Democrats' memo back to the House Intelligence Committee with a letter explaining why. Because it contained classified sources and methods that could jeopardize national security. And, of course, the media predictably ignored all of these facts, and they're attacking President Trump for being anti-transparency. But, of course, we know they're lying. The Democrats were clearly setting a trap for the president. They wanted him to release classified material about sources and methods. The White House didn't fall into the trap, and the president wants to release the memo. Democrats, they have to make the necessary edits, not the president. Now, remember, the Republican memo did not contain classified information. It did not reveal sources and methods. So why can't the Democrats play by the same rules? Because the facts aren't on their side. And for rigid left-wingers in this country and members of the media that are complicit, that are claiming this is, all a plan to block the Democratic memo, not at all. I say release that memo. They clearly didn't read the White House letter or listen to the House Intelligence Committee chair, Devin Nunes. And Nunes is saying, like we're saying, that he wants the memo released. I want it released. Take a look.
We actually want the Democratic memo out. We think it's ridiculous on the face of it. We think it's very political about how they attack myself. They attack Chairman Gowdy. They turn Carter Page into some super secret Russian spy. They talk about how Christopher Steele is a really, really good source when we know that he lied to the FBI. So we want this out. We don't know why they're not in this weekend redacting it so that we can get it back to the White House so the president can declassify it.
Right, there you have it. For Republicans, this whole issue has been about truth and transparency. And for Democrats, the left-wing media, it's all about playing politics. We're going to have more on that in a moment. But first, the Winter Olympics in South Korea began late last week, but not without some controversy. Now, after Friday's opening ceremony, well, members of the echo chamber swung into full gear to heap praise on a woman named Kim Yo-jong, who just happens to be the director of propaganda for the rogue dictatorship in North Korea, and the sister of one of the most brutal, oppressive dictators in modern history, Kim Jong-un. That didn't stop the mainstream media from fawning all over Kim Yo-jong for showing up at the opening ceremony, shaking hands with the South Korean president, and calmly watching the opening procession. CNN, fake news, the whole network, they ran this headline, quote, Kim Jong-un's sister is stealing the show at the Winter Olympics. And Reuters led with the caption, quote, North Korea heads for diplomacy gold medal at Olympics. And not to be outdone, the New York Times writes, Kim Jong-un's sister turns on the charm, taking Pence's spotlight. And the New York Times also tweets, without a word, only flashing smiles, Kim Jong-un's sister outflanked Vice President Mike Pence in diplomacy. And the Washington Post, not to be outdone, called Kim Jo-young the Ivanka Trump of North Korea. And of course, this glowing coverage continued on TV. Take a look.
Athletes from the North and South Korea marching on the same team, waving reunification flags. More history just a few seats away. Kim Jong-un's sister, right there, behind the vice president. She's on hand for the Olympics as well.
In a historic moment, South Korean President Moon Jae-in shook the hand of Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
The sister of Kim Jong-un shook hands warmly with the South Korean president in the VIP box at the Olympic opening ceremonies.
But North Korea is stealing much of the limelight. Kim Jong-un's sister landed at Incheon Airport earlier today.
3 days of the world's media running after the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And still, we know very little about the woman who has stolen the headlines at the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics.
All right, if that's not bad enough, the media also goes after Vice President Mike Pence for refusing to shake her hand in the VIP box. We'll have more on that with Joe Concha later in the show. But take a step back and remember, the woman that the media is applauding is the director of propaganda for a government that has, let's see, murdered around 400,000 political prisoners in what some are calling concentration camps. And these camps have been in existence since 1982. And as we speak, between 80,000 and 120,000 people are still imprisoned in those camps, including men, women, and even children. And according to a 2014 United Nations report, well over 200,000 people from around the world have simply disappeared, never to be seen again inside of North Korea. And don't forget, there are 3 Americans currently being held hostage in that rogue state. Now, the Kim Jong-un regime has also been responsible for the recent death of the American Otto Warmbier, who was imprisoned and sentenced to hard labor for allegedly stealing a poster. But last but not least, millions of people are currently starving inside of North Korea. Roughly 30% of their population starving. All while this little despot, Kim Jong-un, lives a life of luxury and his sister enjoys a prime seat at the opening games of this year's Winter Olympics. And despite all of this, the mainstream media continues to praise Kim Yo-jong. Now, it's pretty disgraceful, but we shouldn't be surprised. It was the same mainstream media that praised, of course, President Clinton for saying his nuclear agreement with North Korea. That's a good deal for the American people. They'll never get nukes. Well, that didn't work out. And if you don't learn from the past, you're doomed to repeat it. And that's why the media is a sad and despicable broken record. And finally tonight, speaking of bad plans, remember the plane loads of $1.7 billion in cash and other currencies the Obama administration stupidly gave the Iranian mullahs chanting death to America in Tehran? Well, now we're finding out that the rogue regime is using a lot of that money. Washington Times reporting that the U.S. government has now been able to trace some of the money given to Iran and determine that Tehran is using it to fund the terrorist group Hezbollah. Big shocker. Here with reaction.